What a headshot! What a head!
How's it, guys? This is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video, I'm going to take you guys through my transfer plan for the upcoming double game week 28. This video is going to mainly consist of some talking points and things to watch out for before we approach that deadline for double game week 28 on Saturday. So in this video, I'm going to be discussing the blank game week 30 strategy, as well as a new fixture that will potentially be added to the upcoming double 28 that might put a spanner in the works. So that's something you guys are interested in? Sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So the first talking point and the first game week that we're going to be addressing in this video is going to relate to blank game week 30. So as you guys know, the upcoming blank game week 30 is going to be a massive one potentially, with the minimum of 3 fixtures potentially happening in blank game week 30. Now you guys know my strategy for the upcoming blank game week 30. I won't be using the free hit. I think I will have enough players, and I also would maybe recommend not using the free hit, as I don't think there's enough fixtures to kind of take advantage of. Saying that though, if you guys don't have any players for the upcoming blank game week 30, you could always just use it to get a full starting 11, and that might be differential enough. But why are we talking about blank game week 30 when it's only 3 game weeks time? Well, the fact of the matter is that this midweek, the FA Cup 5th round will be taking place. And what does that mean? Well, the 6th round of the FA Cup takes place in game week 30, and that's going to be the teams that blank in that specific game week. So in simple terms, if a team wins in the 5th round of the FA Cup, they will have a blank in blank game week 30. And as you guys can see on screen here, the fixtures for the next round have been drawn up, and they are really favourable to those Premier League sides. So there's only 2 fixtures where 2 Premier League teams actually face off against each other, and that's going to be Liverpool versus Norwich and also Southampton versus West Ham. All of the other opposition have teams that they should be beating on paper. These teams come in a division or sometimes even 3 divisions, 4 divisions below their respective opposition, and therefore most Prem sides should advance to the 6th round. So if there was going to be a week that you guys wait to use your transfers a little bit later on this midweek, this is going to be it. I think you guys should be doing that already. But just because we'll know who blanks in game week 30, that might change which players use your transfers on. But now let's talk about blank game week 30 in a little bit more detail, and specifically for kind of FPL and what fixtures will be happening in the Prem. So what I've done is I've highlighted every single game currently been announced for blank game week 30, and we're going to look at what fixtures might go ahead and which fixtures might be cancelled. So on your screen now, you'll see a dot appearing next to the teams that are still in the FA Cup. A green dot means that they're playing a non-Premier League opposition, whereas a blue dot means they're playing against a relative Prem side. So for example, Norwich has a blue dot as well as Liverpool because these 2 teams face off against each other, and West Ham and Southampton also play in the next round. So the only 3 fixtures that are currently going to go ahead in blank game week 30 are going to be Wolves versus Leeds, Aston Villa versus Arsenal, and Leicester versus Brentford. Luckily, the first 3 fixtures on your left hand side, so really easy to kind of see what fixtures are taking place. But the nice thing about these teams is they do have a lot of double game weeks in double game week 28 and 29. So if you want to get some free transfers and some hits, you can bring in players that double, but then also have a blank game week 30 fixture. But now let's focus on the teams that actually might get cancelled. So the big fixture that everyone's going to have their eyes on is going to be Southampton versus West Ham, because if West Ham do beat Southampton in the 5th round of the FA Cup, Southampton versus Burnley will be added into blank game week 30. A lot of us do own the Southampton options. They also do have a double in 28, and Burnley, all of us have kind of had those from blank game week 27, so we could also carry them into blank game week 30. So let's kind of hope that Southampton lose to West Ham. Apologies if you guys are Southampton fans, but from an FPL perspective, that's going to make blank game week 30 a whole lot easier to navigate. Now in terms of the teams with a green dot, I'm expecting them to win just because they are facing teams from a lesser league. Man City, Crystal Palace, Chelsea, Everton, and Spurs should all be winning their respective games, and therefore they should be blanking in blank game week 30. So please just pay attention to these FA Cup games. I will be posting announcements though in terms of my team selection a little bit later in the week to give you guys the rundown of who's going to be blanking and who will be playing. And now go into the next talking point, and it's going to relate to the upcoming double game week 28, and a fixture has potentially been announced for this upcoming double. So what the fixture is going to be, it's going to be for Chelsea and Norwich. So if either Norwich or Chelsea do win their 5th round FA Cup game, that fixture from game week 30 is going to be moved to double game week 28. The reason for this is that Chelsea do not have a lot of midweeks available, and because of the Club World Cup, they have a lot of fixtures to be kind of rescheduled, and therefore this is one of the only available midweeks coming up. So in terms of Norwich's game, they take on Liverpool. That could be a win for them, considering the fact that the Carabao Cup game went to extra time and penalties. So most of those Liverpool players will be quite tired. but I do still favour Liverpool to win that game, and therefore I'm not really worried too much about Norwich. But Chelsea do take on Luton. That should be a team that they are beating, even though they also went to penalties in the Carabao Cup. I think a second string side of Chelsea should definitely be beating Luton, and therefore if they do win in the 5th round, they'll be having a double of Burnley away and Norwich away. On the other side of the spectrum, we have Brentford at home and Chelsea at home for Norwich. That Brentford game could be quite a nice one, but the Chelsea at home game isn't that strong, and I definitely think that Chelsea have the better double. So why this puts a span in the works for most of us who wildcarded, or maybe on a free to a wildcard for this week, is that Chelsea's fixture looks too hard to ignore. Burnley away and Norwich away, even though both of these games are away games, I do really favour Chelsea, but I guess the question is which options should we bring into our FPL sides? So let me know in the comments down below, are you guys bringing those Chelsea assets in? If you guys are free hitting or wildcarding, is it a triple up, a double up? What options are you currently looking at from the blue side of London? And now before we talk about these Chelsea assets and which players to kind of highlight, I want to just highlight the fixtures that Chelsea have from now to the end of the season. And as you guys can see on screen here, although they do potentially blank in blank game week 30, if they do beat Luton in the 5th round, they have some really nice fixtures coming up even after that. Game week 31, game week 32, 33, West Ham is probably the only tough game in game week 34 from now to the end of the season. So you might actually want to get those Chelsea assets in, and if you can bench them for blank game week 30, that's going to be one of the best scenarios to go for. So I kind of just wanted to highlight the fixtures they have just so that you guys have some context of if you want to bring them in, what fixtures you should be watching out for, and what fixtures they'll be blanking in. But now let's move on to which assets to potentially look at, and I'm going to give you guys my 3 favorite assets to kind of highlight. First off, I want to just say I do favor the defense versus the attack of Chelsea, just because that attack is even worse than kind of Pep roulette. There's so much rotation between Lukaku, Werner, Ziyech, Mount, Havertz, all these kind of attacking options, whereas the defense has been pretty nailed if all these options stay fit. But we will definitely be talking about the attack a little bit later on into the video. But right now, I really favor these 3 assets. So the first option I want to talk about is going to be Reece James. Kind of had a return from injury in that Carabao Cup game yesterday against Liverpool. He came off at about the 70th, 60th minute for an injured Azpilicueta, and then he progressed to the penalty shootout. So let's talk about Azpilicueta quickly, because I do think that his injury is going to play an integral part into how we predict Reece James and how many games Reece James will be playing. If Azpi is going to be out for a long time, I do think Reece James has a strong opportunity to start both games, but I don't really think that he's nailed for 2. But if Azpi does return from injury, I don't think Reece James will be starting too many, just because he has come back from a long-term injury. And at 6.2 million, I might look for someone a little bit more nailed at that price point. And that option's going to be Rudiger at a 6.1 million, so slightly cheaper than Reece James, but definitely the most nailed Chelsea defender to get into your teams. And that's why I really do favour the German centre-back as an FPL asset. Now Rudiger does offer some attack threat on those set pieces, but I do think Reece James, if he starts both, or we get news that he'll start both, is the better option from an attacking point of view. And my final option, if you guys want to save some budget but still get quite a nailed centre-back, it's going to be the Brazilian Thiago Silva at 5.6 million. So Thiago Silva, as long as he stays injury-free, should be starting both games. Might be a little bit of a rotation risk, but I don't really think he's as much of a risk as people are saying. And that's why if you guys have to save some budget, I would recommend the Brazilian. But how do we choose between these 3 assets? Well, I have highlighted some important talking points in terms of rotation and kind of being nailed on in that starting 11. But let's take a deeper dive into the stats to kind of navigate these 3. So what I decided to do is go over to Fantasy Football Fix and go to the FPL stats, a comparison matrix, and I've put in Reece James, Rudiger and Thiago Silva and compared them on some various stats. And those stats are going to be expected FPL points, expected goals, shots, FPL bonus points, and finally minutes. Now you guys might be asking me, these are defenders, why are we kind of using some attacking stats? But generally I think the clean sheets should be a staple, but the attacking stats are going to be extras. But I did also include bonus points because from a centre-back point of view and a defender point of view, bonus points are really going to be valuable in terms of these FPL assets. Also, I finally wanted to say that I did compare these players in terms of games played or per game stats, just because there hasn't been a consistent amount of minutes and I did want to compare them from a fair point of view. So let's talk about these 3 assets. On screen here you can see expected FPL points. It's going to be in favour of Reece James at 5.5 compared to Rudiger and Thiago Silva's 4.6 and 4.3 respectively. When we do look at expected goals though, Rudiger and Reece James are tied at 0.1, but quite interestingly enough, from a goals perspective, Reece James has scored 0.3 goals average per game compared to Rudiger's 0.1 and Thiago Silva 0.1 as well. So as you can see here, just from that stat that Reece James is a more attacking player, it's just going to be down to whether he starts both or not. Reece James yet again comes out on top in terms of shots, but Rudiger just behind him on 1.2, and then Thiago Silva coming in at 0.6, which is a little bit disappointing from those set pieces. Finally, in terms of bonus points per game, Reece James leading it with 1 bonus point, which is absolutely mental to consider the fact that every single game he's played he's got an average of 1 bonus point, compared to Rudiger 0.3 and Thiago Silva 0.6. But the final talking point and the final stat we're going to talk about is going to be minutes played, and unfortunately because of some injuries this season, Reece James comes in with just above 1,100 minutes played. But the interesting number there is going to be Rudiger with 2,160 minutes, with, yes, you probably guessed it, is absolutely every single minute played this Premier League season. The final minutes played is going to be Thiago Silva with 1,733, also some injury concern, and because he is slightly older than Rudiger, might be rotated on the occasion. So I guess it comes down to ceiling versus minutes. Reece James has the high ceiling. If he plays both, I guarantee him to get more points than Rudiger, but because Rudiger is more nailed to start both, I might go with more of a reliable choice as my recommendation. But then finally, to wrap up this video, I also wanted to compare the attacking side of Chelsea, and I've highlighted my 3 favorite options here from a midfielder point of view, which is going to be Mount, Ziyech, and also Havertz. So yes, Pulisic could be in the mix here, but I just think I prefer these 3. But definitely the American could be an outside differential if you guys do want to consider him. So I also compared these 3 assets in terms of the same stats as the defenders, as they were quite attacking stats, so will fit to both kind of sides. So in terms of expected FPL points, Mason Mount leads it slightly over Ziyech at 4.2 to 4.1, with unfortunately Havertz coming in with about 1 point less at 3.1. In terms of expected goals, it's the 0.2 across all the players, and that is quite surprising because I would have liked to have seen some higher stats in terms of these attacking options. In terms of goals per game, Ziyech and Mount both lead with 0.3. Shots in the box goes to the Moroccan at 2.7, and it's nice to see that Mount still gets a respectable 2 shots per game. But finally, in terms of FPL bonus points, Ziyech is leading here by 0.6 compared to 0.4 for Mount and 0.1 for Havertz. So just in terms of the stats, it seems there's going to be a Mount versus Ziyech debate, as Havertz stats don't look that strong compared to these other cheaper midfielders. But the final stat, in terms of minutes played, Mount seems to be the more reliable for minutes, but I do think Ziyech has been struggling with the occasional injury, and he is actually injured as we speak. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about Ziyech and Mount, is that if Ziyech comes back from injury, if Tuchel says that he's back from injury, I do prefer him as my FPL asset of choice, but I do think if you guys want to go more reliable, Mason Mount's probably the man to go for. But let me know in the comments down below what assets you guys are going for. From an attacking side, which player, but also from a defensive point of view, which you guys are probably going for. Are you guys going reliable or for more of a high ceiling with the Reece James? But this is basically wrap up the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like if you did, and subscribe if you have not subscribed yet. I'll be seeing you guys for massive content coming up this midweek, free drafts, wildcard drafts, and finally the team selection coming up after these FA Cup and also Premier League games. But I'm going to sign off. It's been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers, bye.